Takes a minute.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Ercule for this webinar on how content actually drives pipeline. We're going to do it kind of as a workshop style. I'm Justin Dunham. I have my colleague Nate Kirchner here. I'm going to hand the baton to Nate in a second, and he's going to introduce kind of what we're doing here, who we are a little bit, and then I'll pick it up and run it from there.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we'll just give folks just a couple more seconds to join. But yeah, once we get a few more folks in, we'll go ahead and get started. So
that sounds good.
1 second.
I feel like I should have some kind of patter here. I do have some fun. I can share a little bit of word art here. Hold on a second. There we go. There's a little high thing. Is that even coming through?
It is. Well, vaguely. I can see like the edge of it, the corner.
Right. That's funny. All right. We'll have to figure that out.
All right. Wait. Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, let's start. Nate, you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this. All right. So welcome everybody to today's workshop, how content actually drives pipeline and how to prove it. I'm Nate Kirchner, joined by Justin Dunham, who is one of the founders here at Ercule and is a bona fide expert on this stuff. So just a couple of quick things about it. We are running this sort of like workshop style. So while Justin will be going through sort of like a process and showing some things on his screen, we do want this to be kind of interactive. So as he's going along and you have questions, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. We'll be watching and he'll try to address those as he's going. But also, we have a little time at the end as well for him to address those questions if they don't necessarily fit into the flow of the workshop. But we definitely want to make sure you walk away with this, walk away from this with a lot of value. I do also believe this is being recorded. So we will try to share a recording of this once the
Nate, is this being recorded? Nate, are we recording this?
I believe so.
Is it being recorded? Okay, great, cool.
I believe it is. So, cool. So anyway, with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Justin, and I'll be keeping an eye on chat. And yeah, take it away, man.
Hey y'all, we're gonna get right into it. I think as quickly as possible. I'll just share that I feel very honored and grateful that y'all are spending a little bit of time with us this morning. So thank you. So I'm Justin Dunham. I founded Ercule. We work on content systems for clients, and content systems are basically how do we get all the things that you know about your product, your POV, the reasons that you're building it, the problems you solve, all that stuff, and how do we build systems so that we can get all of that knowledge in front of your buyers so that they can learn everything they need to know to do their jobs better and hopefully ultimately to enter your pipeline. So we build, like I said, we build content systems for clients. We work on SEO and AEO, we work on analytics, we do writing, we set up LLM workflows. And our pretty strong belief is that all of that needs to come together into one content system to be effective today. So one of the things that we view as our job is to help all of our clients tell the story of content, tell the story of how what they're doing is contributing to the company, because it's not always that easy to know. And part of marketing is, it is a little vibesy, which is unfortunate because your CFO is usually not super vibes oriented. And it's also a little unfortunate for us because when we don't have anything to look at, it makes it harder to know what's working and what's not, and to zero in on some signal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a bunch of methods for showing how specific content is connected to pipeline. Some of them are going to feel very boring, and like I've seen this before. I'll try not to spend a lot of time on that. Some of them I will get much more in depth onto, especially I will spend some time in Google Analytics today, just building a report and showing you what that looks like. But I do want to be very thorough about it, because the more that we can tell the story of marketing and the way that our content helps do our job, which is ultimately message distribution, the better we can do that, the more resources we get, the more satisfaction we get, the more fun our jobs are. Okay. And please leave any questions in the chat. Nate will be helping me address them as we go along. So I think I will start at the top of the funnel, and I am having the craziest internet issue, which is that I can only load certain sites in certain browsers. I figured this out 5 minutes ago, right before the webinar started. Very disconcerting time for me, but I think all will be well. So let's talk about just very top of the funnel stuff. And I'm going to open two tools. One of them you probably know pretty well, and another one that you may or may not have seen before. So let's get some things open here. Okay, great. Okay, and then we'll run with that one. Okay, so I'm going to start with Google Search Console. This whole presentation is not going to be about, it's not going to be primarily or only about search, but I will be including that in here. And let's get Search Console open. I will get the right window here, and I'll get my Search Console window. And I'm going to show you the most boring view here, which is just how many clicks did we get from organic search. And this is related to how many impressions did we get from organic search. So these are two very top of the funnel metrics that you can pay attention to. Why are these valuable? How do these connect to pipeline? How do I tell that story? So this is Google Search Console. It's Google's internal data about where you're showing up in search, where you're showing up in impressions. And there are a couple of ways that you can use this report to show connection to overall brand and also connection to pipeline. One is that you can see impressions. Now, impressions, which I'm not showing on this chart, but impressions are not like an amazing metric. They're relatively easy to get. But impressions for terms that don't include your brand, which are pretty easy to filter for in Google Search Console. There's lots of filters you can sort of set up in Search Console. If you filter out your brand and you see unbranded impressions for your terms, that can mean you're showing up in the AI overview. That definitely means you're showing up in the SERP, even if nobody's clicking on you. The other thing is that attribution is changing a lot. And a lot of search traffic is not showing up as search traffic anymore. It's showing up in offsite journeys. It's showing up as direct traffic because somebody saw you in a search result but didn't go see you right away. So an impression is a very small amount of value. It's one eyeball on your content. It's one appearance in the AI overview, but it's not nothing. And if it's for an unbranded term, if you filter for terms that don't include your brand already, those are new people who are seeing you. So that's like, we'll start all the way up there. The next one that's a little bit more valuable is clicks. And unbranded clicks are also what I'm talking about here. So a lot of people will show a chart like this, like I'm doing right now, and they will tell you, oh, you know, it went up, it went down, and that's great. But the key thing is to filter out the things that are people searching for your brand. That part is actually really valuable for other reasons because it shows that your brand is showing up in search results. But separately, you want to show up for things that are not people already searching for you. And if I make the analogy to Google Ads, if I show up and I get a click from somebody who is searching for, hey, I'm trying to compare all the accounting software vendors. Hey, I am issuing this query that's way down in the funnel and we're showing up for it and we're getting a click. Some of those clicks are worth a lot of money in Google Ads. Some of them are $3, $5, $10, $20, and you're acquiring that click for the brand. So that could be a helpful way. Again, that by itself is probably not going to show you the whole picture. I'm going to show you a bunch of other ways to look at ways to connect some of these analytics tools to the value of your content. But those are two things that you can get right away out of Google search. So I won't spend a lot more time in Search Console, but let me know any questions there, throw them in the channel, and we'll kind of proceed. Okay, so now, since we're at the top of the funnel, let's talk about LLM visibility. So I'm going to show you another tab here. This is Ercule's, this is some example data, but this is how we work with clients. We help them pick sets of topics, finite sets of topics, not like 300 topics, and we help them track where are they actually showing up, among other things. And one of the really important columns in here is this LLM visibility column. Now, what the LLM visibility column is saying when we analyze it, and what you should expect when you analyze it if you use one of the vendors out there, is that a lot of queries are being issued, fan out queries. That's what we typically do, is every topic will have 10, 20, 30 queries in it. That's what most tools do. And what we're doing is we're issuing those queries to all the different LLMs, and we're saying, does our brand come back in the response? If I'm running a Apache Iceberg startup that's adjacent to Iceberg, I want to know if Apache Iceberg, when I issue that to a GPT, to an LLM, I want to know if we're showing up. And there are 2 points to make here. One is that, like, this is another impression. LLM visibility is important because not only do you get the brand influence from somebody who's very engaged with the topic, but also clicks from LLMs tend to convert a lot more. So that's important from that perspective. But we often run into clients who are kind of, we do the analysis for them and they're invisible. And this is a really important sort of secondary theme to talk about, which is if you are at 0% for LLM visibility in a topic, and for that matter, if you're not getting any impressions in search, but let's stick to LLM visibility, you are invisible to people who are looking for that. And while you might not be able to prove the ROI using these statistics right now, the problem with these being 0 is that it's really easy to prove a lack of ROI or a lack of a business problem when these are 0, which is, hey, if we're selling accounting software, if we're selling HR information systems, if we're selling a BI tool, and we're not showing up for any of the problems or the topics that people are actually searching for, if our visibility is 0, if our impressions in search are 0, even if I can't show you the ROI directly, that is pretty self-evidently a significant business problem. And the way you can solve that is through content. So I'm about to go a little further into the sort of the bog here of ways to show this. And I'm going to get into some of the a little bit more interesting stuff and building some reports in Google Analytics. But I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. And if I can find that button. And I just want to recap what we've talked about so far. It's all pretty basic. We've looked at Google Search Console and we've said impressions are good, clicks have a demonstrable value. We need to think about brand versus not branded. Those have different amounts of value and show different things. We've talked a little bit about the attribution problem that you are going to see, and we see this increasingly with clients, more direct traffic, more traffic coming through LLMs, less through search. It's much messier. So looking at overall website traffic can be useful too. But that's the Google Search Console part, is there's demonstrable value from clicks, there's brand value around the impressions that might be harder to sell to your CFO. And then there's also LLM visibility, and there's the brand value showing up there. There's the clicks you might get from there. You won't get a ton, but you'll get some. Those are usually pretty high intent. And then there's the secondary thing, which is an important argument, which is if we are not visible in these channels, which we know people are using for most businesses, especially B2B where we specialize, LLMs, Google search are important sources for these buyers to get their information. Not the only source, but they're important. If we're invisible in these channels, especially for topics that we want to talk about, that is a pretty demonstrable business problem that you should probably find some way to address. Okay, so that's the top of the funnel. I'm gonna keep kind of moving. And now I'm gonna talk about Google Analytics. So Google Analytics, let me share my screen. I think I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar that I'm having this totally bizarre issue where I can only get some sites to work. Fortunately, Google Analytics is one of them. Please keep me in your prayers as we go along here. Okay. So this is a very boring Google Analytics view. It's just showing you, hey, how many views did we get on certain pages? But Google Analytics 4, as incredibly painful as it has become to use, not that it wasn't painful before, has also become really, really powerful. And the things that you can do with Google Analytics 4 are not quite at the level of dedicated web and product tools, but there's a lot here. So some of the things that we like to look at in Google Analytics 4 really revolve around conversions. I'm going to swap around a little bit here, and let's see how this works. I'm going to go to the admin. I'm going to go to the events. Okay. And Google Analytics has a concept of key events. Hoping some will show up in this account as we go along, but we'll see. And I can always show you some other accounts if it ends up not working. A key event is basically a conversion, but it's a first-class citizen, and they're, pretty important in Google Analytics. And so there are lots of tools for looking at how content is associated with conversions on the site. No, that's not a perfect metric. It's a pretty good one. So let me go back here, and I'm going to go back to my reports tab. No, I'm going to go back to my Explore tab. And I have this really boring thing. But what if I could go in and I could look at what is the content that is specifically viewed by people who actually convert? So there's a thing here called segments, and I can create a new segment, and I'm creating a user segment. So I just want to see users who actually converted. And it might not work in this Google Analytics account, but let's see what happens. And I'm going to say, include users when is key event is true. Okay, looks like this particular one may not have a ton of this in it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit while I kind of find us one that works a little bit better. So bear with me for 1 second. But the idea behind the key event and what's called the user key event rate is that people aren't going to show up and convert on the first visit to your site. They may not show up and convert on the 10th visit to your site. It may be somebody else on the team who converts. I would urge you to think about how you buy things. And especially if you're in B2B or anywhere, frankly, this doesn't just apply to B2B buyers. I would encourage you to think about how you buy things and how many times you need to see a brand before you can trust them, how many times you might need to go back to the website, how many times you might need to look at the product pages, how many times you might need to attend a webinar, do something else like that to actually get that trust. And I think a lot of times people sort of forget about the complexities of that sort of journey. And so what Google Analytics lets us do is go through and look at some more of the complexity around that. So I'm just saving a pattern right now, and I'm hoping that I can just show you exactly what this looks like. Okay. All right, great. Perfect. That loaded, and then let's do it this way. I think this will work really well. Let me share my screen. If it doesn't, c'est la vie. Okay. And then I got to remember to share my screen. Awesome. So this is in an example Google Analytics account where we've actually defined those key event rates. And I'll talk about this a little bit more. And this is this metric of user key event rate. This is basically saying how often do our users actually convert? And this is a great thing to look at for overall website health also. You want to keep this in a pretty decent range. We usually look for like 1% to 2%, something like that. But as far as content goes, what if, is what I was saying a minute ago, what if I could show you all the pages as we have there? Let's do page path and screen class. And then actually I'm going to make one more adjustment here before I show you. I'm sorry for the suspense. Okay. All right. That should work. Okay. All right. Fingers crossed. Share the screen. Go back to analytics. Go here. Okay. So now I'll go here. I'll try to replicate that view we just saw. And I'll bring in, let's say, total users for now. That's not a really good way to look at pages, but there you go. Okay. So what we could also do here is we could go through and kind of say, all right, I only want to see the stuff that people who converted actually looked at. So we'll add a new condition, and we're creating a user segment. And in this one, I hope we will get is key event contains true. And you'll see a certain set here, and then we'll apply. And that's what it'll look at. So now what I'm seeing is, what were all the things, oh, and you can't see my screen, sorry. What were all the things that people who actually converted looked at? And then you can see some really boring stuff here, like, oh, sign up pages, of course. Well, all right, well, I'm happy to see that, because at least that means that this is working, right? And then what I can do is I can go in and I can say, oh, well, only show me the blogs. Go ahead, Nate. Were you
I was gonna say, we got one person saying the screen isn't sharing, and then somebody would like to see how to set the report up.
Yes.
If possible. So
yes, totally. So I'll go back and do that. And hopefully I'm kind of sharing as I make some changes here. But perfect. This is a really good example of this. So now what this is showing is, what are the blogs that people who converted in my untitled segment actually looked at? And that's this user segment. So what I'll do is I will finish this thought, and then I will go backwards and just go step by step one more time to show you how to build this report. But this is really helpful, because what this shows you is, what is the actual content that people who converted looked at any time in their journey. So it's not just about, did they acquire it, because you're not always going to get the first view is going to be to some post. It could also come from any traffic source potentially, and it still be part of the journey. So we want to keep in mind, or in this report, we also want to have, hey, these are things that were viewed by converters along their journey. You can make this, I'll show you how to do it in a second. You can make this even more specific. You can actually do, what I really want to see is people who looked at content and then converted that particular sequence. And you can also track that over time and do all kinds of other stuff. And I'll show you that in a second. So let's just recap how this report is built real quick. Oh, and I also missed the question here about a realistic way of figuring out LLM visibility. I will come back to that one in a second. Okay, so let's walk back and actually go through like how the report is built. So there's all these pieces. And then what I did is I started from a blank report. I can actually just start on a new tab if it's helpful. Just go here. And then I created a new segment. And when I created a new segment, I said, create a new segment, a user segment. And then I said, add new condition where is key event contains true. This assumes that you have some of this stuff set up in Google Analytics. So somebody needs to help you, and you're seeing no data available here, and that's what I would expect because I haven't dragged any stuff in. But that's the first part, is this segment piece. Let's rename this so it's a little bit easier to understand what it is. Right now it's just called untitled segment, but we'll call it converted users. Apply. I'll delete my extra little duplicate one. So that's the converted user segment. So now what this report is doing is only looking at the people who actually converted, who actually executed what's called a key event in GA4. And setting up key events is something that can be done in Google Tag Manager. If you have anybody with web experience or analytics person, or oftentimes folks who are working on SEO will be able to do this for you. That is a piece that has to be set up, but it can be done. And it's very helpful to have all over GA4. And if you can get that in, you can segment by the users who have that, which is what I have here. And then what I'm going to go in and say, okay, I'm only looking at that segment. and then show me all of the things. I'm going to take page path and screen class here, which I added using that little plus sign. I'm going to drag it into rows. And then I'm going to take my metrics here and I'm going to say, let's use views today. Let's do views and then drag that into values. And so when this eventually loads, that's the report. And then, oh yeah, Justin, hey, free trial converted, no kidding. What about if we take the page path and we filter this just for blog posts? And you could do this for anything on your site. So now you're going to see, hey, you know, this particular one got seen out of all of the views that it got, which we could actually put in a separate column in this report, but out of all the views that it got, 82 of those people ended up going on to convert. That was part of the journey for all of those people. And that's where there's ROI, because those people might not have converted if they hadn't been able to read this thing. That was part of the journey for them. Before I go back and address the LLM visibility question, does that help as far as building the report? I don't want to obscure that at all. I want to be very clear about how these things are built. Let me know if you have more questions on how it's put together. But the basic concept is that Explore tab in GA4, you create a segment for your converted users or people who have executed this key events thing, and you're filtering for them and you're looking at what content they looked at specifically. And all of those people converted partly because of that content. And so that's part of your ROI story. The other thing you can do as you kind of go along here, and I'll get back to this in a second, so you can show what this looks like over time. You can show what it looks like for different topics, all sorts of things like that. So I'll get back to that in a second. I missed the other question about a realistic way of kind of showing and looking at LLM visibility. So it is very hard to do. We have, or it is a little annoying to do. The price of some of the tools out there that monitor for this are coming down quite a bit. And that can be a good investment. So you don't necessarily need to spend a couple $1,000s, you know, a month or something like that on some of the more sophisticated tools. There are things out there at the $50, $100 a month price range that you can at least put some things in and start to see how visible you are. The way that we do it in the spreadsheet that I showed you, where I showed LLM visibility and all that stuff, is we have code that we run and workflows that we run that go out and like literally ask all the LLMs like, hey, what do you think about this? Did our brand get mentioned or not? But the best way to show LLM visibility from my perspective is to, you know, maybe sign up for one of the tools that's relatively inexpensive. The other thing that you can do is you can, this is sort of the inverse of the question, but I think it's a good thing for everybody on this call to know about as well. Ercule has an app which is free to use, and I'll share my screen for that. And let's get the correct thing in here. And one of the things that the Ercule app does, I'll share my screen. So this is a great sort of, it brings in your GA4 data and your Google Search Console data. And one of the things that this does is it will show you which pages are getting LLM traffic, which is really helpful. So for us, I can kind of go in here and say, oh, our on-page SEO checklist template. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, it's gotten a few views here and there. And that's at app.ercule.com, or you can just go to the top of the site and sign up for it. This is totally free and can give you a little bit of help in at least understanding what's getting LLM traffic. You can also do it through Google Analytics. So my answer to how can you realistically do this is a little bit of budget. Some of the things out there are relatively inexpensive. And then looking at what pages are getting LLM traffic can help you see, here's what we're showing up for, here's what we're not showing up for. And then, you know, hopefully you don't have to do it manually, but all a lot of these tools are doing is literally going to ChatGPT, typing in the question, grabbing the response, and then recording it somewhere. And so that can be painful to do, but I have done that manually in the past a little bit as well. Okay. So there's one more thing in Google Analytics that I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to start talking about HubSpot. I'm going to spend less time in HubSpot than I did in GA4, just because there's a lot of complexity there, but there are a few points that I want to make that might be helpful to you as you're thinking about this. So let me share my screen again. Go back to Google Analytics. And another level that you can take this report to, just so you understand what's in the report, is, yeah, I have this segment that says who actually converted on the site and who did they look at. The other thing that you can do is you can create a sequence. So I hit add sequence here, and then I'm including sequence. And for this, I could say, oh, show me people who looked at any blog. So I'm going to say page location contains blog. And then they converted. So I'm going to go here and go to is key event and go to true. And I'm going to get rid of that one from before. And we'll rename this converted user sequence. So this is really nice, because if I look at the sequence of people who say read our blog and then converted, and I hit apply there, and I'm going to take out the page path and screen class, you can get a number of people who actually did this sequence in aggregate. So as far as creating things in aggregate, or seeing these things in aggregate, this is really nice, because we got 2,300 people over this time frame who viewed a blog and then converted. And then the next thing you can figure out is all users confirm, and then I'll drag all users into here. And one of the things I can show you is, in this case, about 5% of all users on the site is what we're seeing here, are people who went through that sequence. And a lot of sites, we see that this number is up to 50%, that up to 50% of conversions on the site included the blog, or included some kind of content in that journey. So this is another thing you can do to look at, like, okay, if I look at all users on the site over a time frame, and then I also segment it using the Google Analytics 4 tools, and I say, just show me the converted users. That can be really helpful. Okay, so we've kind of looked at a lot of strategies. I'm thinking about wanting to talk about HubSpot a little bit, and also we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure there's questions. So I can answer any questions that y'all have. I think what I'll do is I'm going to try to address very quickly the idea of how you create an event or a key event. I won't be able to walk through that piece in detail, because it's going to depend a little bit on what your site looks like, what your stack is. That part you need a little bit more help with, that I can really sort of cover in this workshop. But there are, often folks on the team or consultants you can hire, other people who can help with that, and it's not very expensive to set up. But if I go back to the admin here in Google Analytics, and I go to events here, you can, in some Google Analytics accounts, create custom events. And let's just go here. And then I could do, I'm going to create a custom event, and I'm going to have the event name, and I can go to create without code. And then I can go to page view, and then include a view of your thank you page, or your sign up complete page, or your webinar registered page. So I went to events and admin, I went to create without code, and that could give you an event. And if you can get that event set up, that should work pretty well, and you might not need anybody else involved. And then you can mark that as a key event in the UI. The other thing you can do is, I've been talking a lot about key events in Google Analytics, but even if you don't have those set up, you can go through, and instead of having a converted users sequence, and instead of saying, page location contains blog, and step 2 is key event is true, you can also just use this as the filter instead. You can say, actually, I never got around to setting up key events. Let's just do, they viewed the blog, and then they viewed the contact us page, or whatever, or they viewed some thank you page. And that can just be the second step of your sequence. And that's another way you can kind of get around some of the more intensive versions of setting things up. If you have HubSpot, you will want to do a little bit of instrumentation. Another thing you can do that I always recommend for forms is that instead of having a message in the screen that says thanks for that, always send people to a separate page as a thank you page. and always sort of make sure that page is tracked, and you can bring that in. So I can't get into all of the details about how to set up an event, but those are some strategies if you can't bring in a consultant, or you don't have budget for that, or you don't know anybody, or nobody on your team knows how to do it. You can go into that settings and you can pick specific URLs as events and then mark them as key events. Or you can, in your sequence, just say, look, I don't care about the key event concept. All I care about is blog, and then they had a page in it that said thank you or whatever it is. Okay. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time, just a couple minutes, on what happens if you have HubSpot. Not all content marketers, content folks have access to HubSpot. Not all content marketers and content folks are working at organizations where they're even using HubSpot. But some of the strategies that you can use with HubSpot are helpful for all kinds of other things. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. And these reports I will not be able to build live. I'm happy to talk about the details, but it's just a little bit too much involved in building these live for the moment. But I'm going to show you a few examples of ways that you can think about this. So one very simple example is just looking at a pie chart of what sources people came in from. And this can be very helpful for showing the value of search as a channel, showing the value of LLMs. If you know how to use HubSpot, you can use this source report and change it from, hey, what I want to see is opportunities, what I want to see is SQLs or MQLs or whatever it is. But this can be a very helpful adjunct to everything else, provided that you have set the expectation with people that content won't always be about the acquisition, that it could hit somebody on any point in their content journey. And also, sometimes it will be direct traffic, not organic traffic, not LLM traffic. This is one simple strategy that you can use, and it's worth looking at even if you don't show it to anybody else. I'm going to very briefly touch on this because this truly is way too complicated to kind of get in on in this webinar. But if you have a HubSpot person, what I'm about to show you could be something helpful to set up too, which is that what you can also do is go through and generate reports in HubSpot that show you what were the top pages that actual deals looked at. And you can use a feature called data sets in HubSpot for this. If you have access to this, this is a type of report. And this can be a really helpful report to look at because you can show first page seen, but you can also tally up all of the pages that people saw on their way to becoming an opportunity and then talk about your influence on that opportunity. So if I go back to Google Analytics and I talk about this concept of what content participated in the journey, that's a lot of what we were talking about in Google Analytics, like what blog pages do people see as part of the journey. You can do the same things in HubSpot using data sets and using some custom reporting. And that's the type of thing that is definitely too big a topic for this webinar. But if you have a HubSpot person on your team, they often can help you with that. It's not a feature that's always available in HubSpot instances, so you need to check on that. But there's lots of reporting you can do there to kind of show the value of what you're doing. So I'm going to pause, and then I'm going to recap real quick all the strategies that we talked about. And then I'm just going to leave some time for questions. I can stay a bit late if folks have other questions. So we looked at a lot of things, a lot of ways to demonstrate the value of what we're doing. And leaving aside the specifics of how to implement this stuff, I think there are two very important kind of ideas to take away from this. One important idea is that if we are not visible in LLMs and we are not visible in search, unless our buyers aren't using those channels, which might be possible, but unless our buyers aren't using those channels, that is a problem. And so that's not so much, hey, there's ROI from doing this, although there is. It's also like that is a business problem to be invisible for core terms and core problems that you solve and other things like that. You want to be visible for that stuff. So that's number one. And then number two is showing the value of content is often about showing its role in the entire journey, in addition to, hey, we acquired X number of clicks or leads or whatever from organic search. So try to think about it that way. And there are some tools that we talked about today that let you do that. And then as a very quick recap of all the things that we went through. So we talked about clicks and impressions in Google Search Console. And you want to make the distinction between branded and unbranded. Both of those are important and useful. Impressions have value. It's not a huge amount, but it's something, and you want to be visible. Clicks, people pay for. So if you get a click, that could be worth between $3 and $10 or $20 all by itself. That can be a way of talking about that. LLM visibility, we're going to get clicks that are going to be much fewer, but much higher intent. And we're going to get the impressions, get the visibility there. So that's a way to talk about ROI. If I then go over to Google Analytics and like actual conversions, we built a report together that shows here are the users on the site who actually converted, what was their behavior, here's how content participated in those journeys. Those people are coming back to our site over and over again, and that's important for us to understand how content participated. And then we talked a little bit about how that works in HubSpot, and it would be the same concept to use in other tools as well. I also want you to think a lot about this idea of message distribution. Like that's really sort of a big part of what we're trying to do here is figure out what our core messages even are and kind of get them attached to all this content. And that's a really important part of changing the way people think and helping them out with what they're trying to do. So I'm going to pause here. Nate, I don't know if you have any questions that have come in through other channels, if there are questions in the chat that you want to throw out to me, but I'll spend the next few minutes answering them.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you so much, Justin. Appreciate you sharing your expertise. I think the main question that hasn't been addressed so far is just going through the process of like creating an event.
Yeah, and so that part is the thing that I mentioned about how to kind of get around the requirements of putting extra engineering time to that. Let me present again, and I'll share my screen. And so if you go to,
there we go, cool.
If you go to the admin and then you go to the events here, you can create an event. You can name it whatever you want. You can mark it as a key event here, and then you can create it without code. And that can be, hey, I want to do a page view where the URL contains contact us or whatever it is. So that's a way of creating an event in Google Analytics without code. The other thing you can do is you can change these reports. And if you go into reports, if you go into Explore and you go into any of these sequences that we set up, you can set up the sequence so that instead of is key event, you just say, hey, I want a page view on this specific page. And that will work too. And that actually avoids having to create events. If you want something beyond page views, that's where you start maybe getting into Tag Manager and other stuff like that. And that can be really helpful to have, but it's not required to get started with this.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that. Also, let me, of course, mention obviously our email addresses are up on our profile. So if you have follow-up questions or want to dive into some of this more deeply, feel free to drop us an email. We're happy to engage and help. I think the other question that I see popped in here is just if you don't have this locked and loaded and like off the top of your head, but if you can recommend a resource for the form tracking solution that you recommended, especially if the form's a HubSpot one.
Yeah, so that's where it gets a little complicated. I think what we could do is maybe put up a blog post over the next week or two, just showing what the code looks like. So to get the sort of really good HubSpot form tracking, what you want to do is you want to add a little bit of JavaScript either to your site or to Google Tag Manager. And what that JavaScript will do is pick up the HubSpot events that get fired when a form gets submitted and send them to GA4 for you. So that's like the really robust way to do it. And yeah, I don't have it locked and loaded right now, but I think what we can do is put up a quick blog post about how to set that up and then just make sure people on the webinar get it. The other thing you can do, if that feels like too much, is you can say, okay, every HubSpot form is going to have a thank you page. It's going to have its own page that people go to, and we're just going to use that page as the confirmation of the form submit. And then you can use the method I just showed you, which is to go into Google Analytics to define a new event based on a page view of that post form page. So those are the two ways you can do it. We prefer the more robust way, but either way will work just fine to get started.
All right, perfect. Well, yeah, that brings us to I think the end of the scheduled time. Anyway, the plan is that hopefully we'll continue to do these. We want to keep this sort of workshop format. So keep an eye out. We'll let you know when the next one is. We'll send you an email. This was recorded, so we'll send you an email that has a link to the recording so you can rewatch. And yeah, we'll let you know when we have the next one. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Justin, for sharing your knowledge, and thanks everybody for joining us. Delighted to have you with us, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
y'all.
thanks everyone. I'm very just grateful that you spent this time with us, and hopefully it was helpful. See you later.
Yeah, 100%.
Bye.